All right, we're back. It's 2024. It's another episode of the Rain Race podcast. I am your host, GT Rain, joined alongside me, Stu, off in the Esses. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty darn good. How are you doing? It's a new year, so new year, new us.
New year, new us, same sports car racing, a little bit different. We got a little bit to talk about. I've been coming off another, we're 2 months in a row, pretty rough sickness, but I got pretty lucky this time where it just lined up that I got mostly better by today. So I got the trusty mute button in case I start coughing. I got the trusty glass of water to hopefully prevent that from happening in the first place. And I think we'll be able to get an episode in here. It seems like it's going to be a relatively short one. The nice part about the Christmas winter break that we just came off of about a week ago is that a lot of people in the sports car racing scene did the exact same thing and took a break, so we don't actually have a whole lot of news to talk about. So we wanted to take the opportunity to turn this episode into a bit of a Q&A session. We got quite a few questions from before the show, and of course, because it's a live show, you got a chat box down below or off to the side, wherever it is, and you can ask us some questions. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can during the show today. Got a couple of people tuning in already. One from Portugal. How you doing, Francisco? It's pretty late there. Probably about midnight, if I'm not mistaken, or 1 o'clock in the morning. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Taurus, how you doing? New year, new me, same tragic sense of humor. Wish I could. Gonna say the exact same thing. One of the things about the new year, actually, I think this was right before the new year, is Stu, you got to go over to Faf Motorsports in are they in Toronto? Are they like right
They
outside
are.
Toronto? Okay.
Yeah, they're not. It's one of the sort of neighboring, cities that all makes up the big blob of Toronto. But yeah, I got to go up and check out their new sporty race car. Of course, the McLaren 720S GT3 Evo. Pretty nifty car. They were hard at work during the open house trying to prepare that thing for the season. So they're taking every moment that they can to maximize every moment possible. They just got it a few weeks ago. Got it all wrapped up. It's beautiful. I'm sure if anyone that's seen it, I mean, if you're watching this show, you've probably seen
It's
an
the
image of it
thumbnail.
somewhere. Oh yeah, true. So if you found
So
yourself here, if you
yeah.
just clicked on the video, then yeah, you probably found it. But Chris, obviously you've seen the livery. What did you think of it? Because I did see some mixed opinions on it.
Yeah, there were there were some mixed opinions. It is plaid. They did hold to their word. Maybe not quite the plaid that a lot of people were expecting. It did lose the sort of lumberjack red and black livery that they had from previous seasons. Now it's sort of depends on your interpretation of plaid. It's sort of a checkerboard carbon livery, if you will, alongside the McLaren papaya orange. I think it's a pretty good livery. I think it's a nice change. It sort of keeps that Faf DNA in the car a little bit, but at the same time looks very McLaren as well. So I'm a big fan and really looking forward to seeing a full season GTD Pro McLaren on the IMSA grid next season.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was definitely the opinions that thought there wasn't enough plaid in it, but I think when you see it up close in person, some of the images that they were released it was it was more difficult to see the plaid in it, the darker images. But you see it in person, there's definitely the plaid there. I was talking with Jason Dakins, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He's the guy that designed the livery, and he's done Faf liveries for a few years now. And he was saying that it's a balance of trying to get what McLaren corporate wanted, and then also incorporate sort of the Faf DNA into that. And you see it. It's got the classic papaya orange, just a hint of the blue in there as well. And then there's a ton of plaid on the car. It's kind of he was saying that there's more plaid on this year's car than there was on last year's car. And I could see it after he mentioned it. So I really like it. When I first saw the renders on Saturday morning, I think it was before I was out the door, I was I was hesitant to I wasn't sure how I was going to like it, but seeing it in person, it was really good. And I see I met Colin, I guess, in the chat. I know there was got to chat with some fans. There was actually a ton of people there. It was a really good turnout for a Saturday morning open house.
Yeah, I didn't even know what was going on until I started seeing some photos pop up. Yours was the first one I saw, and I thought, hey, did you get like a special invite, backdoor access here? And then I saw more people were there for the open house. So really cool event that I think they put on. Not a whole lot of teams do that sort of style reveal. So, and like I said, you and I are sort of on the same page here. It looks like it's a great livery. A lot of people in the chat are saying they're big fans of it.
Yep.
And from what you said, it sounds like it's one of those things that if you're not quite a fan yet, maybe if you get out to see it in person this year, it'll turn your mind around.
Yeah, and another thing that I kind of caught on to, they did a couple of sort of Q&A type segments over the morning, and there was a real sense of excitement around them in the car. They seem kind of like refreshed, and they were pretty pumped up, I think, with the support that they've received from McLaren so far. So it's always going to be an adjustment period taking on a new car, but they certainly seem to have the right attitude going into it, and we know that they're capable of winning. So have to see how they roll off the truck at Daytona.
Yeah. Anybody ask about a McLaren hypercar?
I did not hear them talk about a McLaren hypercar. No.
Nobody's getting that scoop.
Unfortunately.
We'll start asking Zach Brown. The other, I guess, piece of news that we got in IMSA, one of the rare pieces of IMSA news that we got over the past week and a half or so, is that Dragon Speed will be running the full Michelin Endurance Cup next season in the LMP2 class. Now, we reported in the last episode that they got an unexpected call up to the Rolex 24. And we actually have the full driver lineup for that car now. So it's Kyffin Simpson joining James Allen and Eric Lux at the Rolex 24. We were talking, I think, last episode, Stu, about how James Allen and Eric Lux was already a pretty good driver lineup, and Dragon Speed is a very successful team at the Rolex 24. Adding a driver like Kyffin Simpson, I think, is going to even elevate that team even higher.
Yeah. Kyffin Simpson came into he raced with Tower Motorsports last year in the LMP2 class with Scott McLaughlin and John Ferrano before John got injured, and he stepped into that car and he did a really good job. He's a young driver. I believe he's still in Indy Lights. So he's another
got
one
the
of
call
those
up to Ganassi for IndyCar next year.
Wait, he's full time in IndyCar next year?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Full time, yes, full time. I couldn't remember if he was just road course or oval. I'm 95% sure he's full time.
Okay, well, I mean, it's certainly justified based on the pace that he put down last year. Again, jumping into that car with Tower Motorsports, really, really impressive. One of many young sort of IndyCar, Indy Lights guys that was in LMP2 last year and did a really impressive job. So definitely justified that he has he gets this ride with Dragon Speed again, Michelin Endurance Cup races, and kind of coming together last second for them. Eric Lux, of course, lots of LMP2 racing in the past. In recent years, Rolex win under his belt with Dragon Speed. So you're getting a good driver there. And then James Allen involved in that extremely close he wasn't on the winning side of it last year, was he? I can't remember if he raced with CrowdStrike or Proton. I think he was on the winning side of the close finish last year. Yeah,
I think he was. I was enjoying that one from the stands. I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, he did race for CrowdStrike. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so he was, involved in that very close finish. But obviously, you talk about those three drivers, and that's a strong lineup right there. Especially, like I said, coming together so last minute.
Yep.
But Dragon Speed, really good to see that they're going to be able to not just have this be a Michelin, or not just have this be a one-off Rolex entry, but be able to do the complete Michelin Endurance Cup. Being able to put that program together is impressive and good for them.
Yeah, maybe a good solid pick to lock in for the Rolex 24 winner in the LMP2 class. We shall see. Happy,
I don't want to have to pick for the LMP2 class. There are so many. Every time we rhyme off a lineup, I'm like, oh yeah, they could win.
Yeah. Happy Rolex 24 month, by the way. I didn't mention that at the top of the episode, but we are nearing in on the close of the off season already. It's crazy. I remember just not too long ago we were saying welcome to the off season, and now we're already nearing the end of it. At least for the
we got confirmation. James Allen was the winner for Proton last year.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, I couldn't remember off the dome. So I think it's good enough time now for us to switch over to some of the questions that we got from before the episode. Again, I'm going to remind you that if you want us to answer any of your questions throughout the episode, feel free to leave them whenever, and we will try to get to those after we get to the pre-show questions. I got a question from Canada MC. What is the most underrated track in your opinions? Well, this was a two-part question, so we'll start with that one. Underrated track. I'm going to leave it in the realm of IMSA and WEC in the spirit of this podcast. I'm going to say Road America. Fantastic track for IMSA. I was lucky enough to go there once in 2021 for the IMSA race on sort of interesting circumstances. Ended up there. But fantastic facility. It's a track that I think personally deserves an IMSA endurance race. It used to be an endurance race in the American Le Mans Series. Didn't really maintain that after the merger in 2014. I was just talking about this the other day, in fact, that if there was one additional track on the IMSA calendar that I think should get an endurance race, it would definitely be Road America. I think a race there going into the nighttime hours would be phenomenal. Ultimately, with IMSA in the past few years they've gone there, it's put on pretty average races, I would say. Certainly not poor or boring races by any means, but nothing exceptional. But you don't have to look too far back to see some incredible finishes that it had in the American Le Mans Series. You can also look at the finish that they had in the Michelin Pilot Challenge a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago now. With the dramatic rain ending of that race. And I believe Rebel Rock Racing won that race. Yeah. Short answer made long. I would say Road America is probably my pick for the most underrated track, at least between IMSA and the WEC.
Man, I feel like there's that Road America is a good one. There's a lot of it has all the makings of just a good track and just to put on good racing. Beautiful backdrop as well.
Yep.
This is a question. I hadn't thought of this at all before recording, so I'm definitely on the spot here. But off the top of my head, one of the first ones that came to mind was Mid Ohio. Mid Ohio being a bit underrated in the sense that I feel like it always gets overshadowed. I mean, maybe just a recency bias with it being dropped from IMSA, and although it is coming back next year, but the WeatherTech Championship, of course, not returning. Just kind of the rap that it's had the past few seasons as well, with some of the facilities aren't in tip-top condition. It definitely needs a little bit of work. But I think Mid Ohio, when we have seen racing there, it has put on some great races. I wanted to go really really niche down, or go even below sort of. Well, I think IMSA may have used to race there, but Mont Tremblant is one that's I guess it's kind of in that vein of like Lime Rock. It's in that vein of like Lime Rock, Road America, where it's just set in such a beautiful environment. It's set at the sort of the bottom of some of the. It's basically set in a ski town,
Yep.
and just the surrounding area is beautiful as well. I haven't been to the track in a number of years, so I don't know exactly what shape it is, but I know Lawrence Stroll, I believe, owns the track, so I think it would be kept
Yep.
in in pretty good shape. But if you wanted to go with sort of maybe a lesser known one that hasn't been used in a number of years, I think Mont Tremblant has got to be up there for me.
Yeah, and you mentioned Lawrence Stroll owns that track. I was actually going to say that with Aston Martin entering the sport in next year now. No,
Ooh.
it's 2024.
Yeah, true.
Uh,
If Chevy and Ford can get a race to come to Detroit and they take the GTPs away from CTMP, then
yeah, maybe reaching, but
yeah, I think
who
that's
knows?
probably a reach.
And Mid Ohio, you mentioned the interesting part about Mid Ohio is they actually just had a repave in the off season.
True.
But like you said, the facilities were, from the media side of things, one of the things holding that track back, I think. But yeah, it's been on and off the IMSA calendar a couple times now in the past 10 or so years, unfortunately. And then also the next question that we had, this is one for me, I think. Thoughts on a GTP only Lime Rock race to supplement the GT one? Um, I've been very opinionated about this in the past, and especially now with the GTP class being really the headliner for IMSA. I've always said that it would be great to have those cars racing at Lime Rock and at VIR. So I did some research after we got this question, and I was trying to think of, because one of the things that always gets brought up is there's not enough room on the track to do it. So whether that's not enough room in the pit lane to host all the cars or hold all the cars, or not enough, the track's simply too small and it's not going to accommodate that style of racing. So I looked back to the 2013 American Le Mans Series race at Lime Rock. There were 33 cars on the grid that year across 5 different classes. Given the current IMSA championship, I think that would be just under what we would expect nowadays. With the 2024 lineup of full season entries, it'd probably be around 35, 36 if you had GTP, GTD Pro, and GTD racing. So I don't really think it would be entirely realistic, unfortunately. Also, the GTP cars might concede and say that they're just a little bit too quick for a bull ring style track like Lime Rock. VIR, you might have to make a similar argument or a similar case for. But in terms of a GTP only race, which is what the question was asking, the interesting part about Lime Rock is that, and maybe a lesser known fact, is that the track is actually heavily regulated in terms of when they can actually run races. For starters, they can't run on Sundays, which is why you've never seen an IMSA or ALMS or Grand Am or anything race there on a Sunday. And the other thing is that the engines at the track, that race engines have to be off at 6 p.m. So when you combine those two facts and you really look at it, I don't think that the schedule would really be there for them to run a GTP only race. But I think it does bring up an interesting question. We do see right now, so a couple of, well, I guess next year there's only one GT only race at VIR, but we've typically been used to 2 the past few seasons. I'm wondering, with GTP really being a headliner right now, if perhaps a prototype only race would sort of make sense in IMSA, or if maybe the case isn't there for that because the manufacturer sort of expression isn't quite as high in those classes as it would be in a GT race. I don't know. Some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. We haven't seen a prototype only race. I mean, I don't remember there being one. Um, yeah, I guess I imagine it would probably have to do with sort of maybe manufacturer activation stuff. If you have the GTP cars and the LMP2s as a prototype only race, then you're only going to have your 4 manufacturers in GTP that are going to be showing up with, activation stuff at the track. And I know
Right.
that's not all of it, but at the end of the day, like there's a lot of marketing that's involved in auto racing. So
Yep.
I yeah, I it's probably has to do with the lack of manufacturers making sure that you can at least get the GTD class cars at the track, to have that manufacturer representation. That probably plays a lot into it. It would be cool
Yeah,
to
and
see
that's sort of what
a
I was hinting
prototype
at. But
only.
yeah,
Yeah,
if it was ever going to happen, I think it would happen in the next couple of seasons because
yeah,
prototype racing has never been this strong in IMSA in at least a decade. But you can go back even further than that if you want. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's going to happen to Lime Rock though, simply because of the time constraint. Like I said.
yeah.
Got another question. In your video titled "The Nurburgring 24 is a must-win race," you mentioned that the best part of the event is that the fact that it is not part of any championship. However, that's going to change in 2024. Will that change or devalue the event? So, a couple things here. That race is becoming a part of the Intercontinental GT Challenge for next year. It's going to be one of 4 races on that calendar. The big thing that I really like about the Nürburgring 24 is that it really feels like, and I said this in the video, but it feels like a race with no rules. Um, and I think that there's a case to be made for even a race like Le Mans in that case, where Le Mans used to actually not be a part of a championship either. It wasn't part of a championship until 2012 again, when the WEC picked it up. And I think that a race like Le Mans so all right, let me answer the question first. So the Nürburgring becoming part of the IGTC, I don't think it's going to change the event. In fact, Stefan Rattel said that the IGTC presence will not alter the event's traditional spirit in any way. So that there's not going to be a planned exclusive tire supplier for the race. And I do think that that's one of the big things that makes the Nürburgring 24 fantastic, is that there's a bit of a tire war, even in the GT3 category. Back to my point about Le Mans, though, is starting to lose my voice here. The 24 Hours of Le Mans, like I said, was not a race in the championship until 2012. And one of the nice parts about that is that you didn't really have to worry about the championship while you were actually in the race. So one of the things with Le Mans nowadays is you're worried about points. You're worried about this is a double points race for the WEC. And the other part of it is you have to carry over all of the baggage of it being part of a championship. So that's where you see some more politics come into play. They're a little bit more selective on what cars are actually able to enter the race. We're not seeing quite as much tire representation as we had seen before. So no, I don't think it's going to affect the Nürburgring 24, but I do think it brings up an interesting point that I've always had, which is that big races becoming part of a championship generally, I think, devalues them a little bit. They do bring some great things to the event. Like, of course, with the WEC, we have a stacked lineup of cars racing in a world championship now that are also racing at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but sort of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think immediately. I don't think it devalues the event. I think it's still the Nürburgring 24. The feel of that race, with it being one of, if not the most challenging sports car race in the world to win, isn't going to change. I wonder how it could affect some things, 5 years down the line, X number of years down the line, when if there's small changes that are made over the years, just how those add up and how those could sort of change the event. But I don't really think that this is going to devalue the race being part of the greater championship here. I still think still obviously highly regarded around the world, and definitely a must watch event.
Yeah, and I didn't want to. I was initially questioning whether or not I was going to touch on that question because, of course, we do try to keep this podcast more tied to WEC and IMSA related things. But like I said, there was a bit of a tie-in with, large scale races like the 24 Hours of Le Mans with that question as well. So figured it might be able to slot in there.
And there's a lot of drivers that do race
Oh, of
they
course.
cross over and compete as
Right.
well, which should still continue to happen.
Yep. Got a couple of questions from Hill Climb Racing. With Peugeot now going for a rear wing, do you think that will increase their chances of better race results? So the big thing that car has had issues with, from what I've gathered, is consistency, and the car is extremely circuit dependent. So take a look at the design of the car. Virtually no rear wing as it was in the 2022, end of 2022 and 2023 seasons. The car is obviously designed around Le Mans. So they got to Le Mans this year, and certainly it was their strongest performance. I would have hoped it would have been their strongest performance. The whole car is designed around that race. But I still don't think it was a race winning car. They were just lacking still a little bit of performance throughout the entire race this year, although they did have quite a bit of the race that they were leading. So I think what the rear wing is going to offer them, if nothing else, is greater consistency across the board. The track that I saw them struggle at the most was actually Sebring, because that track is so bumpy that they have to raise the ride height on the car up, and then their underbody downforce is nowhere near as effective. So hopefully what we're going to see next year from them, even if it's not more performance out of the gate, is just a car that they're able to get a better understanding for, that they can work on throughout the season, and maybe towards the end of the season, or maybe at Le Mans next year, be challenging for the race win.
Yeah,
And we got oh god.
I was just gonna say, I think it was a good experiment. It was really neat to see it all unfold. They just couldn't get the performance out of the car, like you were saying, that they needed to, especially on a consistent basis. And if adding this rear wing on, and sort of going away from the concept that they started with, even if it's just a little bit, if it's going to yield more consistent results, and like you said, give them a better understanding of what that car, it's only going to make them better when it comes down to Le Mans, when they enter that race with a good understanding of the car, and hopefully get a better result.
Quintessentially French, by the way. The lack of a rear wing. Nobody else would do that besides a French manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I really do applaud them for it. The great
Yeah.
thing about the current rule set is that there were parameters. You had a certain power level you were supposed to hit, a certain level of drag, a certain level of downforce. They were able to build a car that, for the most part, was able to perform pretty well within those parameters. And it was a completely radical car design. And I really do applaud them for doing it. I don't think that them adding a rear wing is a sort of a I'm trying to think of what I want to say here. I don't think them adding a rear wing changes the fact that that I applaud them for trying something ambitious, basically.
Yeah.
And then got another question. The rumors of Vanwall coming back in 2025 with the Glickenhaus twin turbo V8, do you think they'll have better performance as well? Now, I got to raise my hand here and put up a correction from last episode, where I think it was you, actually, Stu, that mentioned that they were looking at the Peugeot Motors V8 for the Vanwall. And I pretty confidently said, I don't think they were. And then it turned out that I missed an article from the end of November from Sports Car Racing 365. Or
But
Sports
you
Car
missed a
365,
piece
sorry.
of news?
I did. I missed a piece of news somehow. And threw that in the description for you. Basically, from what I was able to gather from that article, Vanwall had actually struck a deal with Peugeot Motors, who was the engine supplier, or they were the engine supplier for Glickenhaus, to supply them with engines for next year. And it was only after that their entry was denied for the 2024 season. So the problem with that car, I think, comes down to the cooling. And I think that that's become a pretty public issue, because I don't think the engine itself that they had was an inherent problem. We saw that exact same Gibson engine running in the Rebellion R13, which in 2020 was the second fastest car to ever lap the current configuration of Le Mans. And it certainly had no issues with top speed. I think they were putting out roughly the same power level. The Vanwall, in theory, should be putting out a little bit more power than that Rebellion was, but pretty close. And the other thing that I gathered from that article is that at certain tracks this season, depending on multiple variables. It could be down to weather, altitude. Um, the Vanwall was down up to 80 horsepower on where they should have been, dictated by the balance of performance. So I think what happened with that car is they had to detune the engine on the car because the cooling wasn't sufficient. So if that's the case, I wonder what a change to that Peugeot Motors twin turbo V8 would bring to the car. Perhaps there's something they see with the engine in that car where it would require substantially less cooling, and maybe they could run that engine to its higher potential. Because I don't think the Vanwall really got a true chance to prove itself, at least chassis-wise, this season. Because they were just so slow on power that they often found themselves back towards the LMP2 field. So it would be interesting to see them back in 2025. I think it's a bit of a gray area because, as I mentioned in a previous episode, as more and more manufacturers come in, we're seeing that with Aston Martin next year, and more privateers raise their hand and say, I want to race a Porsche or a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or whatever it may be. Those entries seem to be getting the priority in the selection process. So we'll see if they come back next year. But if they do, I'll be very interested to see how that car could perform with a different engine.
Yeah, I don't know how much the engine is gonna I don't know if it's gonna help it too much, but you do know that the Peugeot motor was strong with Glickenhaus, so they were quick with it. So if they, if you don't, they got to try something, I guess, but are they trying the right thing? Who knows? And this could all be for nothing as well. Like you mentioned, there's no guarantee that they're going to be back on the grid next year. It's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out. But yeah, I don't have too much of an opinion on this one, but yeah, they better be faster with it if they're going to go through all this trouble.
Yeah. I got another questions from Scuffed Jacks on X. I'm looking at going to one of these two races in 2024, the 6 Hours of Coda or IMSA at WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. Which would you recommend? I would recommend both, quite frankly. But
yeah.
So I'm not going to give you a definitive answer to that one. I'm going to, as somebody who went to races in both championships this year, just sort of give you a bit of a rundown, because I feel like they actually are structured pretty differently. I've been going to IMSA races, at least in capacity of the ALMS, since 2008. And the one thing that's been extremely consistent with IMSA from every single race I've gone to is that they are probably the most fan-friendly sports car racing championship out there. I have yet to be swayed otherwise on that basis. The amount of access that you get just as a general fan, even at races like the Rolex 24, which is the flagship race for IMSA, where you think they might lock it down a little bit, you can still get into the garage area. You can still get onto the grid pre-race. And I don't know how a typical WEC weekend is set up. Now, certainly, I'm not going to say that WEC is offering a poor fan experience. Quite the contrary. At the 24 Hours of Le Mans last year, obviously, with that being a race with 300,000 people, you're not able to get quite the same level of access with just a general admission ticket. So, for example, we weren't able to get into the garage area. We weren't able to get onto the grid. That was a separate ticket that you had to go buy. Rather expensive ticket, by the way, for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So what I would say is look into both options with an open mind. The 6 Hours of Coda, you are getting an endurance race. And it's one of the races that I'm looking at potentially going to in 2024 as well. But couple different options there, a couple different series, and I'm going to leave that one up to you, I think.
So I think for me, it all comes down to what you sort of value, what you're kind of interested in from a racing perspective. And I'm not just talking about the championships are going to be both great to go and see. Track experiences, I mean, are going to be great as well. But you know, are you looking to go and be awed by a track size like at Coda? The track, I've never been to Coda, but the track, it's a massive Formula One track, massive amounts of runoff. Um, there's the big tower too. It's kind of a spectacle to go and see, and get to sort of experience that atmosphere. I think somebody mentioned in the chat, WEC is charging for grid access this year. Whereas the track experience at a place like Laguna Seca is going to be a little bit more intimate. It's an old school track. You're going to be a lot closer to the actual, the track line. I guess where the cars are running. I don't know what I'm saying. The track line. I was thinking of the driving line. That's what I was thinking of. You're going to be a lot closer to those cars while they're running around the track. You're also going to, of course, get paddock access at no charge, being able to interact with all the teams. But the thing that I'm going to put forth, and this is the deal, this is what makes this an absolute no-brainer, knock it out of the park for Laguna Seca, is the MX5 Cup is going to be there. So I rest my case.
That brought up an interesting point that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about Lime Rock and GTP. I will shut up and never talk about GTP cars racing a Lime Rock ever again if IMSA just gives us an MX5 Cup support race there. I think it would be perfect. It's a bullring style track.
Yeah.
Just throw the 30 MX5 Cup cars,
Yeah, they're talking about going to they explored Martinsville with the short NASCAR oval with the MX5 Cup cars. You have kind of an oval-ish, it puts up similar lap times to some of the NASCAR ovals. So yeah, send the MX5s
one left-hander at Lime Rock. It's a big oval.
That would be a blast in those cars, I'm sure.
Right, yeah. Going back to the question, though, actually, the other thing I thought of is, I guess depending on whether you're a fan of prototype racing or GT racing, I guess could determine it as well. With the WEC, you are getting a little bit more diverse prototype field right now. You have, especially if you want to go see Ferrari or Toyota, Lamborghini will be racing at Coda. If you're a GT fan, I feel like that's where IMSA has the upper hand right now. They have a Pro GT lineup, or Pro GT class alongside GTD, whereas in the WEC, you are just getting the one LMGT3 class for this season. So, like I said, there are pros and cons to both. I would explore it in a little bit more detail, and I think you're not really going to lose with either one. Question from Formula Jonah. Do you guys think sometime in the future Team Joest could reactivate their relationship with Porsche and run a customer 963 in the WEC or IMSA? Joest is no longer involved in the Glickenhaus Hypercar project, so theoretically, is this a possibility in the future? In theory, yes. Does that mean I think it's going to happen? Maybe. I don't know. So Porsche's put a pause on their additional customer teams right now for the 2024 season. Beyond that, we're not sure. Joest, like you had said in the question, had a prior relationship with Porsche. They won Le Mans with Porsche in 1996, 1997. So if there was any hypercar, GTP car that I could see Joest running, it would probably be the Porsche. But it's really one of those wait and see questions. There certainly hasn't, to my knowledge, been any rumblings of that occurring. But we all know that evidently that I'm not too good at reading up on recent news, so I might have missed something. But yeah, like I said, that's really one of those wait and see things. I would say it's a possibility, but I wouldn't go any further than that.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we would see them ease back into something, maybe like an ELMS. They're not. I was trying to look that up. I don't know if they're doing any sort of prototype program right now.
Nope. They are with Glickenhaus gone. They are, I think, empty-handed right now.
Yeah, that's a problem. You need to see them pick up something. I think it would be a slow ease back into it, and maybe by the time they've sort of eased back into things, then there'll be 963s that are available, or there'll be an opportunity that will come up to be sort of that team that's running a program again in one of the top classes. But um, I don't see it in the immediate future. That's for sure.
Yeah. Question from Andrew Brodsky: what manufacturers, not already in or planning to be, would you like to see in Hypercar LMDH? Audi.
Oh,
uh, as a person who was brought into sports car racing as an Audi fan, uh, the Audi R10 and the Porsche RS Spider were the two cars that really made me the sports car racing fan that I am today. And I try to be bipartisan when it comes to being in the semi sports car racing media scene, but obviously, if you know me, you know I was a big Audi fan. And if they were racing in IMSA and the WEC right now in the prototype ranks, as they were supposed to be, I would be rooting for them at every single race. Unfortunately, with the change in management and the change of their racing plans across the board, axing basically everything for Formula One, we're not seeing that take place, and I would do quite a lot to have that program rebooted, even though it seemed like it could have just been a rebadged 963. I would have loved to have seen Audi back just to defend their Le Mans pedigree. But a couple other manufacturers, I look at manufacturers like Ford and McLaren. The nice thing about manufacturers joining the hypercar scene or the GTP scene is they bring a lot of fans into this sport, because a lot of fans have allegiance to a certain manufacturer. And I don't think there was any greater example than Ferrari. The amount of fans that Ferrari brought into the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year was evident. The amount of fans from the Formula One side of things that crossed over and are now fans of Ferrari and the WEC, I think has brought a ton of fans in. So if we could see a manufacturer like McLaren do the exact same thing, that would be fantastic. And of course, Ford, you don't really have to say a whole lot. The amount of Ford fans who would show up to a track to see their car fight for the overall win, I think would speak volumes. Although, quite frankly, I don't really expect either of those manufacturers to be joining. Certainly not Ford right now because of their commitment with Red Bull and Formula One. McLaren's a little bit more up in the air, but we've sort of heard rumors of them on and off for the past probably 5 years now. So who knows if that project will ever see the light of day.
Actually, there was a good article that Daily Sports Car put out. I think it was today or yesterday about McLaren and their GTE efforts. I would recommend going and checking that out. How they basically built a GTE car and then it kind of fell apart at the last second. It's an interesting read. For me, manufacturer that I would love to see, you mentioned McLaren. For me, well, it's McLaren for now, a homer reason, I guess, because if I get to see a plaid LMDH or LMH running around the track, I'm gonna be pleased about that. One though that we haven't talked about is Hyundai, and I would love to see them coming into the sport in one way or another. If we have to wait until I think they were interested in the hydrogen regulations. I think they were one of the ones interested in that. But whether one way or another, I'd love to see them be involved in the sport, and I would love to see Brian Herta Autosport make the step up to running one of those top operations. I think that they run a tight ship, and it's pretty impressive what they do with the operation that they have in the Michelin Pilot Challenge right now. And of course, their other racing efforts. I've only seen them in person, the setup and everything in for the Michelin Pilot Challenge, but very impressive. And I think that they would be a top-notch team to have one of those high-end programs. And hey, if who wouldn't love to see Robbie Wickens ripping around in an LMDH or an LMH.
Yeah. Addicted to racing. What are you guys most excited about for the upcoming 2024 IMSA and WEC seasons? For me, it's the race at COTA. In the past, the battles that were amazing with the LP1s, I would love to see what is possible with the huge field at COTA. Still sad that WEC isn't going to Sebring anymore, though. I would say, on the IMSA side of things, looking forward to a sort of a championship rematch. I think that there are a lot of manufacturers and teams who, in the hypercar category, have a bit of a revenge tour to go on. Porsche, obviously, disappointed of some people in a few races this season. I know that people thought they would have been like the last 3 or 4 years now. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what the championship battle is going to look like in IMSA this year. Also excited to see an uptick in manufacturers in the GT classes. Ford in GTD Pro, McLaren, we were mentioning with Faf earlier. Just really excited to see some of those new entries on that side as well. And then for the WEC, I would say a couple of different things. The new tracks I'm excited about. I'm excited to see what WEC looks like at Brazil. They haven't raced there since 2014. I'm excited to see the cars at COTA. Interested to see what the season opener at Qatar looks like, because Qatar is a track that none of the current teams have raced at. So it's going to be a completely clean slate for every single team, no prior data to work off of, and I think that that's going to be pretty interesting to see what performances we can see. And then also new cars in that championship as well. We have Lamborghini racing full season, BMW full season in the hypercar category. And the 24 Hours of Le Mans is just going to be somehow even more stacked next year than it was this year. So, I'm sorry, this year than it was last year.
Easy.
So really looking forward to seeing that race in particular.
Yeah, that's a good point with all the new hypercars and that are going to be joining in the WEC next season. There's going to be some great racing. Some cars that we've been fortunate enough to watch an entire season of, or I guess one car that we've been fortunate enough to watch an entire season of in the BMW. That's a big ad with a very strong team that's going over there. That'll be fun to watch. For me, I think I'm really looking forward to the Rolex 24 this season, and mostly because I think for a lot of people, there's still a bit of a sour taste in their mouth after kind of what happened at the race last year. Of course, Deflategate, and I think it'll be good to just get that race, have it run, and be able to fully put last year's Rolex behind us, so that we'll never talk about it again. I mean, it'll be definitely one of those races that is talked about for a long time. For many reasons, so much there's so much to talk about in that class that it's going to be a real pleasure to watch that all unfold next year. On the WEC side of things, I'm going to stick with the GT trend and say the LMGT3 cars and that new class. Really excited to see how those are going to fit into to the championship. That it's going to be some great racing, and hopefully that gets the love that it deserves, because that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Those drivers and those teams duke it out in that championship. And like you also said about the new tracks that are going to be coming, multiple new tracks, or returning to tracks that it's been a little while since they've been to, and having that nice breath of fresh air, and also an expanded schedule, if I'm not mistaken. Is it one or two?
Yeah, one extra race from this year.
One extra race? Okay. So having that, that slightly expanded schedule, nobody's going to complain about some more racing. So that'll be great for all of us as well.
Yeah, and I forgot on the manufacturer side for the WC, I completely forgot to mention Alpine, and I completely forgot to mention Imola for the track side. So,
true.
So much changing in one season there that I lost track. let's see. So that brings up an interesting point because I had mentioned everybody's going to be on a clean slate for Qatar. I got a question here. I think the discussion point of this year is BOP in WEC Hypercar category. First year teething problems are over with, so there are no excuses. If a GTP car can't get a win or come close multiple times, I expect controversy, and this thing could begin to unravel. It's the $1 million question. It's the question that I first posed in our first episode back with this podcast, which is, when do we see other teams and other manufacturers really start to take it to Toyota? Really start taking it to Toyota. I'm just killing it tonight.
Nailed it.
Qatar is going to be interesting in that sense that it is a clean slate. Toyota doesn't have prior setup data to work off of. They're going to be on the exact same page as everybody else. And to your point, I think that people are going to be a lot more critical this season if it is another Toyota runaway. We had a season last year where Toyota won every single race except for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. They won every single race except for Le Mans pretty comfortably, might I add. And I know that brought a lot of controversy, especially towards the later stages of the season. A lot of questions getting brought up with BOP, especially among some of the newer fans. And I think that that's going to be a trend that ultimately continues if we see more of the same next year. Now, I don't say that to discredit Toyota and their ability to perform at all. I'm just saying that that's probably the likelihood of what's going to happen. So, yeah, if we're not seeing, you mentioned specifically GTP cars, so the LMDH cars, from what I'm gathering, but I think across the board, if we're seeing more of the same from what we had this year, then you're probably right. It is going to become a talking point. And I wouldn't go as far as saying that the whole thing's going to unravel if that's the case. But amongst fans, you might see some sour tastes online.
Yeah, it might go from, kind of a grumbling to a little bit more of a yell from the fans, I think, if you see the same sort of thing unfold this year. But I don't want to go too far down the BOP rabbit hole, but I think we talked about it on the BOP episode that we did. If I'm not mistaken, is the WEC changing some things with how they're doing their BOP next year? Or did we just talk about...
So they had a plan, or I guess they had a plan in place that they could have changed the way it was handled. Ultimately, that was voted against by the manufacturers. So I believe what we're going to see next year is the same sort of system. I keep saying next year. I keep forgetting it's 2024. Bear with me.
It's only been 2 days.
I think it's going to be mostly the same as what we saw this year, but we'll have to wait and see if they're going to leave it on the multi-race basis that they had this year, where they were doing BOP like 3 races in advance and they would do them in sort of intervals. That's what I'm curious on, to see if we get the same system from that side of things.
Guess we'll have to wait and see. IMSA's changing their BOP slightly, or how they're determining it, taking a little bit more of a hands-on approach. So I wonder if if that's successful for them, then maybe WEC takes a look at it. I don't know. It's convergence.
It depends
everybody's
how vocal
supposed to be friends.
Yeah. It depends how vocal the manufacturers are ultimately, but
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm hopeful that we're getting a little bit more battling going on for the front of the class this season. Another question, am I the only one a bit worried about Jota's hypercar lineup? Admittedly, I'm not familiar with all the drivers, but it just doesn't seem as fiery as its previous ones. I would say a bit of the opposite. I think that Jota has a very strong driver lineup for this coming season. Just a quick reminder on the lineup across both hypercars. In the number 12 car, they have Callum Ilott, Norman Nato, and Will Stevens. In the 38 car, you have Jenson Button from a feeder series. You have Phil Hansen and Oliver Rasmussen. A couple of drivers coming up there from the LMP2 ranks. I guess the only driver that carried over from this season's lineup was Will Stevens. Notable loss there was Yiffy Yi, who is going to of course Ferrari for their privateer Ferrari 48, not 488, the 499P, and Antonio Felix da Costa, who will be focusing on the Porsche Formula E program for next season. I think that Antonio Felix da Costa is really the big loss for that team, unfortunately. But I don't see any concerns with Jota's lineup across both cars. I think that they're going to be able to put up a pretty good performance for this season. And the big thing with Jota is, especially at the end of the season, they were putting out better performances than the factory Penske program. So you have to wonder if some point maybe, this is just me talking here, but you have to wonder maybe if Jota ends up getting a bit more factory support if they keep putting up performances like that this season. Time will tell, I suppose.
Yeah, those are pretty strong lineups, I think, that they have right there. They'll be right up fighting. Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to take a step backwards or anything like that with these lineups.
Yep. And I think last pre-show question here, if I'm scrolling down all of them.
I believe so.
What are your thoughts on IMSA's driving standards going into 2024? I'm honestly still a bit bitter about Petit Le Mans, both as a Porsche fan and about the ending as a neutral, though the caddies are my second favorite. $1 million question, I suppose. We always see at the end of the season some interesting driving standards at Petit Le Mans. I don't think that this past year was an outlier in that regard. I don't know. On one side of things, you could make the kid like you would never see what we saw at Petit Le Mans this year in the WEC because Durrani would have simply been slapped with at least a 1 minute stop and hold penalty and probably would have taken the 31 out of the championship. That's for you to decide if that's how you want the championship to be decided, because ultimately it's a double-edged sword. There's some people who will say, "Oh, let him race, let him fight it out. We don't want this to be decided in a post-race penalty or a pit lane penalty in the final hour." And then there's the other side of people who will say, "What happened at Petit this year was a bit of a disgrace, and 31 team shouldn't have won the championship because of it." So I'm going to leave that up to you because I'm not going to get myself in trouble either way. I'm going to take the Switzerland neutral response here. But
Switzerland.
To answer the question, I don't know if we're going to see any large-scale changes this year. I don't think the criticism has been high enough for IMSA to change anything majorly. But I don't know, Stu, some of your thoughts on that?
So I guess the question, what are your guys' thoughts on the driving standards going into 2024? Well, I can't think back on a real incident. Okay, actually, the one incident that sticks out to me from this season where it was like driving standards where I wasn't impressed with was the Sebring incident at the end of the race. It was just massively over aggressive by, I thought, both. I can't remember I think was it Matt Campbell in the Porsche. I can't remember.
I can't remember.
But I can't remember who was in the Porsche driving. But it was very, very, very aggressive on both fronts there. The Petit Le Mans, we've talked about that incident quite a bit. I thought it was just both of them driving hard. Did they maybe cross the line a little bit? They were both aggressive, but I don't think it was at the same level as it was at Sebring. The one thing that sticks out for me this past season is just the sheer number of incidents that we had that were like kind of these over aggressive, silly incidents. And that's where I hope that it gets cleaned up a little bit, maybe with the loss of the LMP3 class. I'm not going to blame the LMP3 class for lots of the incidents because I actually thought for the most part last year they were pretty good apart from a couple of really bad ones. But maybe with removing the LMP3s, maybe that helps a little bit relieve some of the sheer number of incidents that we've seen. So I guess from that perspective, I don't think we're going to see any changes from the IMSA officiating side of things. There's very much that sort of have at it, let them race sort of attitude, which I think is one of the things that makes IMSA unique. Contrast that with the WEC. They're both very unique championships, and I think that's one of the things that that definitely does make IMSA unique. So I don't think I want to see every incident being harshly penalized, but obviously there's a very fine line that you're walking there. They're not going to let things get out of hand, but I hope it overall cleans up a little bit, because I think we saw way too many incidents, way too many full course yellows over the course of last season, and especially at Petit Le Mans, we saw like 11 full course yellows, I think, in a 10-hour race, which is ridiculous. But yeah, let's see the driving standards. Maybe the over aggressiveness just toned down a smidge, and I think we'll be in a good spot.
Give us a 24-hour race at Martinsville, all right, and then we'll discuss driving standards.
With MX-5s, yeah.
Yeah, with MX-5s. All right, moving on to a couple of questions we had from the show down in the chat. Wild Stallion, do you think Porsche and Ferrari will be more competitive at Daytona in GTD this year? Obviously, both of those manufacturers were bringing new cars to the grid last year. So, de facto, I would say yes. We would expect them to be more competitive. They have more data on those cars now. They're not brand new anymore. Ultimately, what it comes down to is the cursed 3-letter word that sort of dictated a bit of Porsche's poor performance at Daytona last year. So I would say yes, but I would also say wait and see, because I don't think we're going to know for sure until the cars are actually on track and we know what the cursed 3-letter word is going to look like for those manufacturers this year. But yeah, by default, I would say expect a little bit more out of them, just on the basis that the cars are a little bit more experienced.
Yeah, I have a lot. Maybe I'm too confident that things will be resolved a lot on that front this year. But based on the changes that I think IMSA has implemented for creating the BOP for next season,
can't say that. You can't say BOP.
Oh, I can't say that word? Okay.
I'm kidding. Can
I say bop? Like
Go
the bop
ahead.
it? Is that
ahead.
that game?
I'm just being an ass. Go ahead.
I think based on the changes that that IMSA has implemented for the word that cannot be named, I think I'm confident that things will be a bit better. Honestly, I'm not really that concerned about Porsche and Ferrari at this point. IMSA has plenty of data now on these cars. They know that the Porsche maybe wasn't the best car, and that they weren't actually sandbagging at that BOP test last year. But I think with the changes that they'll implement are going to be implemented for creating the 3-letter word this season, I think it's going to be a lot better. As it always is, though, you kind of have to expect these brand new cars are just going to be a little bit behind maybe some of those the cars that have been on the grid for a few seasons. So Corvette, Ford, Aston Martin, it's if you're IMSA, you really do not want to upset Porsche and then Corvette fans in back-to-back seasons, because there's a lot of pitchforks that are going to be pointed at you. But I have more confidence than I did last year. I think that I think the BOP is going to be a lot closer this year.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I hate to sit. I feel like with half the questions tonight, I've sat here and said, let's wait and see.
Yeah.
And I really hate to do that. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to with some of the performance-related questions, because as we saw last year, things can change on a dime, and especially on a system that's built off of BOP. When a car is at the back one race and absolutely nowhere on performance, at the next race they could be ahead by quite a bit. So, yeah, that's where I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, we could be talking about Toyota and the changes. The only real changes they've made from last season to this season is they've changed the color of the car. Well, what if changing the color of that car, it's a black car now? under the sun, overheating. We
We'll wait and see.
I'm yeah, we'll wait and
Yeah,
see.
yeah. I
Obviously, that's an extreme, ridiculous example.
the funny part about that though is back when Mercedes in
Yeah,
F1 first switched their car to an all black livery, people were actually saying those things. So
yeah. I
you
think
never know.
Bottas was complaining about how hot it was in the driver uniform.
Yeah. I got a question. What do you think is the primary challenge in designing a racing engine in this era? Packaging it in the chassis, endurance for 24 hours? Um, so the nice thing, we were just talking a little bit poor about BOP, but the nice thing about BOP is that it does allow you to have a little bit more expression and freedom with the choice of engine in the car. Um, Previously, manufacturers, well, I guess this isn't just BOP, but also just how the regulations are designed. Uh, you're not seeing manufacturers forced to design an engine that is as much for efficiency as possible, because ultimately the cars have different size fuel tanks that are regulated so they can go roughly the same amount of time per stint without needing to refuel. So we are seeing a bit more freedom in that regard. And that's why we see Cadillac with a naturally aspirated V8 that sounds phenomenal and is a fan favorite, as opposed to maybe a V6 that they might have had if they were forced to try to make the engine as efficient as possible. So I would say the biggest challenge is probably the endurance factor of it. Some of the engines are actually not repackaged, but they're sort of adapted into the cars. So we saw that with BMW. Their engine is at least based off the engine that they had in their DTM car back when the DTM cars were running
Yep.
V8s. Glickenhaus was running the Peugeot Motors V8 that we talked about at the beginning of the show. That or I guess the middle of the show. That was, to my recollection, two rally engines that were sort of just bolted together. It was sort of just like a two four-cylinder engines, two banks of an i4 that were bolted together to make a V8, and then two turbos slapped onto it as well. I believe that's how that engine came to fruition. So it's really just adapting those engines into a car that can then run for 24 hours, I think would be the biggest challenge. And then packaging it in the chassis, I don't know if that's as much of a challenge as the endurance factor. Obviously, I don't think you're going to be able to fit a massive V12 in. Actually, Aston Martin's doing it, but with the
Well,
constraint of the LMDH chassis, I don't know if you'd be able to fit a V12. That might just be something from the hypercar side of things where you get complete control.
yeah, I think Aston Martin. I thought I saw something that there's a different sort of engine program that they're working on for getting that implemented into the car. But I mean,
Did I
we'll
miss
have to
another
wait and
news
see.
story? Did I miss?
Well,
They're not.
this one, I think I saw this one today, but and I can't remember where I read it. But um, I think for the most challenging part of it today, I was kind of toying with, you know, I think the most difficult part of it, oh man, this is kind of like a really broad, but being able to justify it to like the execs
Oh
at one of
yeah,
these companies,
big
like
one.
you can't just, you need to have an engine that is, it feels like your brand, like Cadillac has that big, beefy, naturally aspirated V8. Sounds amazing. It sounds like just America. And being able to balance that also with the budget that you're under to produce these cars as well, because give these manufacturers, give these teams an unlimited budget. They're going to go out and they're going to make a bulletproof engine that sounds incredible, but you put it in with the constraints of budget and being able to really tie that back into these massive car manufacturers and massive brands. I think that's got to be a pretty big challenge for them.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that one. That's a big point though. Let's see. scrolling for other questions because I did see a couple while we were going over a bunch of them. Um, my
Oh,
chat
what
just
the
got.
uh, Tara says, what does Trans Am have to do to be able to get him out to the Trans Am race at Lime Rock in instead of what is it, the Indy 500 weekend? Does it share that?
It would be the Indy 500 weekend. I don't know what Trans Am has to do. That's a
I think that's probably a pretty big ask. Trans Am
yeah.
is good. Trans Am is good, but if you're balancing between the Indy 500 and Trans Am, it's probably going to be a you're up against it with that one.
All right, in your opinions, which Ferrari team, past or present, ran the best livery? I get put on the spot with livery questions, and I have to go back in time and remember my favorite ones. All right, so this is a bit of a left field one because it didn't run in IMSA or the WEC, but
Oh,
the I don't remember there was a GT3 livery that ran in World Challenge. That was the Kaspersky. I think it was Kaspersky Motorsports or something. I would say that one though. I can't remember exactly what year it ran. I believe it was on the 488 though. And I'm trying to remember other ones that stand out from the WEC or IMSA side of things. I mean, it's an easy answer, but I've always just been a fan of just a nice red Ferrari.
yeah.
Ricci's been pretty good at keeping that car in Ferrari colors throughout its history.
That
And when I
big
was making
Pennzoil
the
logo on the side too. The red and
yeah,
yellow looks nice.
when I was making the GTE video that I posted a couple days ago, one of the clips was Lime Rock in 2005, I believe, when the right after the Ferrari F430 just came out, and Ricci had an all red livery on the F430, and I was looking back in that, and I just said, it's such a good looking car with that color. You don't have to overdo it. Red Ferrari. Big fan of those things.
Red Ferrari, top-notch choice. Give me the Triarci Competizione. I can't really
Yes.
remember that many other ones, but that car last year has stuck with me. Just that chrome red.
Yep. Yeah, we mentioned that last episode in the
We did.
the favorite livery of the season. I
Yep.
believe that's all the questions, and I'm very sorry if I missed any of them. If I did, I'll try to get it into the next episode, but I believe that was everything.
We have
So,
one more.
we have one more.
more here to touch on, and it's
Friggin' missing
from
stuff.
Featherfin Films. I did not realize that was going to be that tricky to say. Also, any word on an upgrade package on the Porsche GT3? I don't know if the three-letter word is going to help it that much. There has not been any. There's not an upgrade coming for the Type 992. Of course, it's just a year old. I would probably expect that they started to get better as the season went on. So I would expect that they'll be closer this season. No upgrade kit for that though. There is an upgrade kit, or there are upgrades for the Porsche 963 though, but
Yeah.
not really anything that we're going to be able to notice on the outside of the car. I don't think there's anything that is actually on the outside of the car that's gonna change there. So all of it's under the bodywork.
Yep. Yeah, we just got that new Porsche last year in the GT3 category. Porsche introduces a new GT3 car every 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
so we're probably, funny as it is to say, only being a year old, probably nearing the halfway point of that car being a thing, and then them introducing the next generation. But yeah, I would say in the next probably 2-3 years, look for an upgrade on that car, but nothing for this year.
It's kind of
That
wild.
is the nice part about, if you want to talk about BOP, the nice part about it is that it will keep a car that is a few years old in contention with cars that are brand new. So,
Lexus.
we saw that. Yeah, we saw that with Lexus. The Corvette C7R in the GTE ranks was throwing punches still in 2019 at the end of its life cycle, even though they sort of had the car was introduced in 2014. They had a bit of a refresh in 2016 with the aero regulation changes. But yeah. So I think that is good enough to call this an episode. Had a couple questionable points where I thought my voice was going to go, and we made it to the end, and it's another almost hour and a half episode right on command. So we'll be back 2 weeks from now for regular scheduled programming, because in a few weeks we have the Rolex 24. So next episode is going to be a full-blown, full-scale IMSA preview episode. Looking at IMSA preview. We'll be doing an IMSA preview next week, and then next episode, and then the following week, the 23rd, we're planning on doing a specific Rolex 24 focused preview episode for that race on the 27th. Stu, any closing thoughts before we wrap this one up?
No closing thoughts, except just going back to that question about should I go to Laguna Seca or go to Coda. Go to either one, but you're going to get to see hypercars at either one, but you're only going to get to see MX-5s at one.
Leave it at that. Anyways, thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. Hope to catch you in 2 weeks, and take care.